everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast. And after our last podcast in Dundee, we've moved up the road to Aberdeen, where we're going to talk to Charley Buchan from Fitlike Records. Hello, Charley.
Fitlike.
Nah, I'm fancy.
So expectant.
Absolutely. Writer Shane Strachan. Hi, Shane.
Fiddle yourself.
Aye. And Jon Reid, otherwise known as Mood of Collapse, blogger about all things cultural in Aberdeen. Is that fair?
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on, Jon. Trying to bamboozle me with a local lingo here. I know.
Full Doric new.
Yeah, that would be the thing to do. I thought a good place to start actually would be to quote from your website, if you don't mind. It's about, I think you said this was written a while ago, but it says that Mood of Collapse, when it was Dancing in the Dark, is an Aberdeen-based arts and culture blog. It arose from the negative persona that nothing cool or interesting ever happens in Aberdeen, whether that be music, art or other cultural events. To some, the city was a wasteland and they had no interest in changing things. However, I knew a different city, one with a bustling art community and filled with people who were making things happen. From record labels to art cafes to exhibitions and DJ nights. But this disconnect existed between those in the know and those who maybe wanted to engage but didn't know how. So I started an art blog with the intention of trying to promote, document and join the dots of Aberdeen's cultural landscape. So, with that in mind, do you think that situation has changed, and if so, kind of how?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's definitely more happening than there ever has been, and I think there's more support on an organisational level than there ever has been. I think there's still a bit of disconnect between events, exhibitions, music stuff and the intended audience sometimes. And I think part of that's maybe looking at how things are promoted and how things are disseminated online. Things like setting up an event page for your exhibition 2 days before isn't helping anyone.
Right.
So I think there's still a bit of work to be done around that. But yeah, otherwise, I've seen the last 10 years, it'll be 10 years next week since I started the blog, and I've seen massive changes in how things are perceived, and certainly now we're starting to see culture be used as this tool for the councils and for the city as a way to promote itself.
All right, that's interesting.
Which I think is a good thing in some ways, but kind of needs to be.
So do you think it's them recognising that there are people in the city that are creating really interesting stuff, and they've decided we've ignored this for too long, or some bright spark has said, we can use this? Yeah,
I think there's been a kind of few different approaches, because I think like my girlfriend Mary obviously does like the Painted Doors project, so it's funded by the local business improvement district, Aberdeen Inspired, so they've acknowledged a gap in what they provide for the city centre as far as getting footfall and stuff, and they realise that the art should be part of that and should be quite an important part of it. I think the council have done quite a lot as well. Certainly, like Shane could probably speak more about this, but like with creative learning, they do a lot of great work trying to reach into the communities and trying to provide funding and opportunities for people as well. The big thing we still face, I guess, is graduate retention.
Right.
People come out of Grays and they think they need to go to Glasgow or London to do stuff. Whereas I've always believed actually you could have an exhibition in your living room or your kitchen or whatever, because that's what guys have been doing for the last 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. Culture exists in the big galleries and stuff, but it also exists in people's houses.
Of course, yeah.
But I've seen a shift away more from that. So there seems to be less people willing to do that stuff, and the first question is, where's my funding coming from?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you need funding to do it, should you, if that's your immediate response to something,
you've got it the wrong way around.
Then you maybe need to take a step back and have a look at what you want to do.
So Charley, we were talking briefly before we started, and you said kind of similar that you've noticed the difference in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. That there seems to be, the scene's a kind of horrible word, but there seems to just be more happening in the city. And you pointed out that their venues are getting updated, or new venues are happening. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. again, you've got council-owned venues like Lemon Tree and Music Hall, and they're a staple. But the Music Hall, I think, is due to open in December, and there's an additional venue within the Music Hall now in one of the lower floors. But I think it's more grassroots venues that we lack in Aberdeen, and I think that's what's really holding back any scene.
This is in the terms of music, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we used to have certainly Dr. Drake's. You used to get alternative touring bands come to places like, what's currently known as Krakatoa. It used to be called the Moorings. It was more of a rock metal bar, but you get pretty alternative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And latterly there's a place in Holborn Street called Downstairs that started off kind of cheesy, and it was a place for getting your first gig, and you kind of blood yourself at there, but it closed down as well due to noise complaints. But there's very few places in Aberdeen where you can see alternative, unsigned, unknown,
Right.
real alternative bands, and that's a real problem that's holding us back. I would hope that means it really drives something underground. People start putting on their own shows in houses.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody, I don't know if you know any differently, John, but somebody who said, "Oh, I hear there's a great electronic music scene in Aberdeen." I was like, "Is there? Really?"
Yeah.
The thing is with electronic music, it's so easy to do that these days. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to go to studios. You can do that from your bedroom, and there's lots of platforms online.
Yeah, sure.
And there are guys I do hear, Erskine Linus, I don't know if you know him, John. He's great. There is some good electronic musicians out there, but again, where's that local live platform for them? I don't really see it. So I really hope that the only positive offshoot from venues not existing or closing down is that it forces people to actually find alternatives, get non-traditional venues. Certainly that's something I've tried to do with a label, is try and find places that are non-conventional venues. So whether it's a village hall, whether it's an old library, there are lots of places that people just don't think to ask, but it's not a music venue, so how could you play there? Ask. You find that most people in Aberdeen are really amenable to actually being asked, "Can I use that space? Is that for hire? Could we possibly put something on?" And I've found that the majority, there's a few places I've not been able to get access to, but by and large I've found that folk are really amenable to "Oh, you'd like to put on something here? Great." Yeah. And it's people just, I'd hope that it forces them to think outside the box. Like, where can I put on some gigs?
Yeah,
where
sure.
can I have some shows?
Because most city centres now, for all sorts of reasons, have spaces that are sitting lying empty, and they would be perfect for these things. And funnily enough, I went to a gig just recently which was in someone's front room, and that's something that seems to be growing as well, that people are putting on house gigs, as long as the neighbours don't mind. But what they did was they invited all the neighbours into the gig, so it was absolutely worth a treat. So Shane, John said you could maybe say a bit more about the how council is backing the arts in Aberdeen.
Yeah, I work for the creative learning team part-time, which is part of Aberdeen City Council, and I've done that for 3 years now, and that's really opened my eyes to what was actually there, that I, as someone who's more who came as a student to the city when it was the highs of the oil and gas, and it felt like there was a lack of culture because there was this focus on drinking, nights out, flashy car type. So that kind of feel of this, that's what the society was, to then the recession actually turned things around, I think, in terms of arts, because of this idea of kind of makeshift DIY, things became cheaper, and I started working for the council about that point, and there was a big focus on the graduate retention issue, and that was probably down to the cost of rent and cost of staying in Aberdeen after you graduated. So we ran programmes called things like Sustaining Life as a Creative, and tried to help folks see how they can earn creative income, basically in a city like Aberdeen where it can be a challenge, but it kind of helped it work out at the same time where it was becoming a little bit easier. And a lot of the success that programmes come down to the sense of kind of stopping people working in silos. Even with cross organisations, there used to be more of a sense of arts organisations weren't talking to each other, creatives from different disciplines weren't talking to each other, and suddenly you were bringing them into the same room, building confidence in individuals to kind of progress their careers. And there was a big push mainly for visual artists, designers, because of Grey School of Art, but I then myself have seen that there's all these writers coming out with their masters in creative writing, and they were also lost, so I did a similar version called the Writers' Room for writers, and that helped me find a community of writers at the same level as me, emerging, going towards established, and now I have like a great proper critique writing group, and that kind of made me feel more at home in Aberdeen. And it's just those things, once it's kind of trying to build smaller communities within the bigger community that are talking to each other, and that's been the biggest change, I think.
This idea of collaboration as much as you can. I'm interested in the time frame, so it really was a sense of when noticeably the money was kind of going out of the city, then the arts were maybe seen as more important, because previously perhaps council thought, well, you know, we've got this money in.
Yeah, there is a bit of that double bound thing of it is great, there's more money going into it and there's more focus from the council, but that might be down to focusing things like economic benefit rather than cultural experience, and it's trying to get the balance right of actually saying, how do you measure cultural experience, how do you measure that, not in terms of numbers but in terms of how it actually impacts on someone. So the one-to-one working with people, mentoring, coaching, I think that's what I've seen has been most effective from my role within the council. But you sometimes worry about how it's viewed on a bigger scale when you can see the journey someone's been on, but if it's not, 1,000 people turning up to something like a gig, then how is it viewed? So it can be quite challenging in that way. And I think marketing's been a big issue for Aberdeen. I think it's usually where recently in Dundee, and Dundee knows how to market itself as a design city. And so Aberdeen try to find its own narrative of what's our story, and I think it's become a lot about the heritage and the history, and bringing in the language and the Doric is part of that, just like Fitlike Records, that being in the name and so on, but also our connections with our twin cities, international connections like New York Festival coming from Savannah. So I think we've kind of tried to find something that's a bit different from other cities, and seeing that we're not looking inward, we're actually looking outward. We're just maybe not facing the other cities in Scotland, we're actually facing out to what else is going on internationally. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, that's the idea of finding an identity for your city when perhaps you were for years so strongly identified with one thing. I mean, Glasgow had it the shipbuilding, and Dundee had it jam jute and all that stuff. And as you say, they've really managed to turn that around well. So so Charlie, when you what did you want Fitlike Records to do? Basically, you were saying that there is different types of music, and perhaps they weren't meeting up or crossing over or getting to know about each other. Was that something that you wanted to do? Because there's different sounding music coming out on the label.
Yeah, there is, and it was never intended to be. I mean, I guess the name lends itself to perhaps more traditional types of music, and folk might assume, and certainly I think folk have come to some events and gigs in the past assuming that it's bothy ballads.
Oh really? That's interesting.
I've put on a few things where there's maybe older folk have come along and it's like, oh, what is this? I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a Doric, an evening of Doric entertainment. It was quite a few years ago, Pataton, and there was enormous interest in it, but the idea was not looking at traditional uses of Doric. It was contemporary. It was people that use Doric as part of their work, as just part for the course, not using it for nostalgic sakes, not for comedic purposes necessarily, because it's always viewed quite dimly. I think locally it's always been viewed, it's starting to change, but it's been seen as holding people back outside of the northeast. You're regarded as a bit backwards if you're using Doric.
Right.
So you don't use that. And certainly at school, I mean, Shane will be the same. Growing up in a rural place, coastal town, it was absolutely frowned upon, and it was driven out of you. You don't speak like that. And it is absolutely changing. So I put on an event called Nae Futrits Here, which was, ironically, I haven't said it was not about comedy, it was a Scotland the What reference, but I was trying to say this is not about Scotland the What and having a laugh at it. So we had spoken word stuff, we had various musical acts. There was actually quite a blue comedian. I don't think there's many Doric comedians. He had strict instructions to pull back on his blue language. Oh, don't you worry, I'm going to put a tie on and nothing, he said. Then within 5 seconds he dropped a C-bomb, and me and the organiser because it was held at university, were looking at each other in horror. What did he just say? But you know what? It was great. But there were a lot of elderly people that turned up waiting for bothy ballads, you know, more traditional music basically, and that's not what they got. And there was visual. John did visuals in the evening as well, and it was fantastic, and people loved it. Simply because it's people still just use Doric.
Yeah, and
they do.
Of course, yeah. Well, every city, I think, has the same thing. You've got your what's considered working class or regional language, which certainly was, if not outrightly discouraged, was never encouraged. You know, in the schools. And I think that's kind of changing all around the place. But I think what's happened with Doric compared to what's happened with Gaelic, you know, is an interesting comparison, because that is really promoted. Whereas I think you're right, there's still this idea that a Doric, like a Glaswegian or something like that, is something that shouldn't be. It's maybe okay for comedy and Connolly's and things like that.
I mean, we're speaking about identity. You could not get a stronger indicator of regional identity than the Doric dialect.
Yeah, sure.
It's one of the most rich and varied dialects you can find in the world.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting and varied. And to think that it really was driven out of you as a child. And you ging home and you'll speak the way you speak, but you go into school and it's completely different. And I've actually got an auntie who's a primary teacher in Inverallichi, which is a wee village beside Frisbee. She always stuck out to me as a bit of a rebel, and she always did little projects. Maureen, do you know Maureen?
No.
She always did little projects with her classes, and she was one of the few. And I think if that was at a management level, she would have been chastised.
So, John, this idea of when you started up the website and writing about it, what was it that you wanted to change? What you know, did you see that there was a problem getting around this idea of a folk scene or anything like that, or what was maybe expected of northeast culture? Was that something you wanted to change?
I think it was. I mean, it was the start of social media really coming in.
Yeah.
And seeing so many friends just being negative about stuff, you know, in conversations about art and culture and music and stuff. It was always kind of, but you know, Aberdeen's kind of crap. Nothing ever happens. And I was like, so many friends were doing exhibitions. There was like Project Slogan had just opened. There was one night I wrote about, I went to like 3 DJ nights and 2 exhibitions. And I was like, if you did that in any other city, it would be normal. But in Aberdeen, it's extraordinary, you know? So if I can do that, the only thing that's making me different from the guy that's moaning about nothing happened is the fact that I went to it. And it's not even about saying that everything I went to that night was amazing, because some of it was pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
But I went, you know, and I could say, actually, that was pretty crap, you know, because I'd experienced it. And I think that was the thing I've always tried to get across. It's not about saying, like, everything you're going to see and do is going to be amazing, but you have to go and you have to engage with it, because otherwise you become part of the problem. You know what I mean? And you're actually actively holding others back from maybe stepping up and doing stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so it's about trying to reinforce that participation element, but in a positive way as well, you know, and just trying to encourage people, but also seeing, like Shane was saying earlier about the organisations and these dots of stuff and these silos, you know, like this organisation does great stuff but they don't support anyone else because they're like publicly funded and they've got their Creative Scotland money, and then this organisation's doing great stuff but they don't go to their events because, you know, there's weird politics involved, and then there's like a little guy here who's just wanting to try and help everyone, but like nobody supports him because nobody knows who he is, you know. So it's like trying to say, like, well, actually, you know what, guys, like, you want good stuff to happen and you want good stuff to happen and this guy wants good stuff to happen, so if we all just support each other a little bit more, then, you know, it naturally should create that visibility for stuff, and it should create that sense of like, actually, there's a community here and it's open and it's for everyone and it'll engage from the artists and musicians to the guy in the street who has no idea what it's about, you know, and that's my vision. That's what I'd really love to see. Like, it's just somebody who could walk in off the street and go, "What's that about?" And there's somebody there to smile at them, greet them, and say, "I'll tell you. If you think it's shite afterwards, that's fine.
Yeah, sure.
But I want to give you the opportunity to understand it, you know."
But do you not think, John, that there's a natural dourness in the Aberdeen psyche? And it's been there for a long time. It is changing. It's starting to change because those conversations are now happening, exactly like you're saying. But it's a distinct Aberdonian thing. This dourness, really down on Aberdeen as a city, and it goes back to the identity. Aberdeen's shite. There's nothing in Aberdeen. Actually, it's quite a distinct place, and part of that distinctness is the dourness, but there's so much to be celebrated. But I think people were unable to see that for such a long time and able to praise it and say, you know what, we are different. I mean, it's a shame because the city has suffered in terms of its physical environment and how that's been developed, where it should have been. We were speaking on the balcony, we were saying this is the oldest thoroughfare in Aberdeen, and really there's none of the original fabric there apart from the name and the street width. And I think that's a real shame that Aberdeen's not capitalised on its amazing civic history. And people, I think partly because of that, don't recognise how special, unique Aberdeen is, because they look around them and they want to be a shiny, gleaming new city. Like, they look at other European cities and say, we need these new buildings. Actually, there's a lot to be said for the history and the heritage that we've sadly neglected it to an extent.
I mean, you think that when there was a lot of money, for some people, obviously not everyone, but in the city, there was this idea, well, let's build it and make it new, as you say, new and shiny, and almost that overlooks what happened before. The older buildings, the older thoroughfares and all of that.
I think cultural projects in the last few years, I mean, they've definitely changed my perception at least, and I now feel like I could be a tour guide in Aberdeen after not knowing anything about it when I came, because I was involved with the National Theatre Scotland did Granite, which was celebrating the granite heritage, obviously the granite industry, but they also were celebrating different sort of local heroes from across time. And then me and Charlie ended up actually meeting through a project called On Real Estate, which was for the Look Again Festival, which celebrated different buildings on Union Street, and I was like, how did I not know these things about these buildings? And it's actually through the cultural project that, you know, I gained the knowledge rather than being asked to do something because I already have that knowledge. It's just the learning experience is amazing through, and I just think, oh God, I wish everyone could be a creative and be involved from that side as well, because they really get a more of an intimate sense of the city now. And
so that idea that local history perhaps wasn't, or regional history even, wasn't promoted in schools or in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's one major problem across Scotland, I guess.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
Understanding of history, yeah.
But I think that also highlights another issue that we kind of face, like even within the cultural sector, is that we all have our kind of isms or our specialist areas. You know, so Charlie's music, you're writing, I'm kind of visual art stuff. And we tend to stay within those bubbles, whereas for me it's like, I love Aberdeen. I think it's one of the best places I could possibly live. And the reason is because we have writers, and we have musicians, and we have artists, and we have filmmakers, and we have theatre, and we have architecture, and we have a beach. You know, and it's looking at all of those things that make up the culture and trying to make people maybe understand that, I think. You know?
I think that's probably how we met in the first place, is because I think we were quite similar in that respect. Not so much now, but when I started up the label, we did put on a lot of shows, and there was a lot of cross-discipline stuff. Jon was coming in doing visuals. We did something at 17, and we had a film show, and somebody made a short film about socialism in the city and the trade unions, showed that, put on a performance. You know, trying to get artists involved with musicians as well, and I mean that's important for me as well. The music is it's not just about the music, it really is about how is this music presented. Let's not just try and get a nice cover. I mean, the art you can see behind me, it's an artist called Steve Murison that we climbed up Loch Nagar recently with. And
that's how close they are.
And I'd said, Steve, would you fancy doing some artwork? And he threw himself into it, and he listened to the tracks, and he took back a couple of paintings and described in great detail how they linked with the music in every song and how that was represented through his art. And it was incredible, really amazing to have somebody pay so much attention and detail to your own art and express it through their own. You know, and that's a big. I think that's so gratifying for both.
Absolutely, and it helps both as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And
I had a similar sort of experience. Last year I was starting to get to the point where I was like, is there anything left to do in Aberdeen that I've never been involved with? And then the National Theatre Scotland came up and did this thing called One Day to Play, and you could meet different disciplines and artists, and I really wanted to be paired with a visual artist because I'm probably more interested in visual art than writing, but weirdly enough. And I did get paired with one, and we were sent out to listen in on folk, and she was sketching people on the street, and I was listening to conversations for a verbatim theatre piece. And we ended up creating this whole show around bus shelters in Aberdeen.
Oh, wow.
And just when I thought there was nothing left for me as a writer that uses Doric, the expression I hadn't heard, I've got this whole other kind of resource now of the stuff that we listened to across 4 months going around these shelters, and it just made me go, God, there's a whole other project in this and we want to do more with it. But just to think this time last year I was thinking, like, what else is there, what's left? So I think that's a surprising thing. It's, you kind of get to a point where you do everything in your own discipline, and it's that exciting point actually you start to reach out where things can really change, your career can really change as well. Because I thought I wouldn't go back into theatre again, just kind of focus on prose, and now I'm kind of being pulled right back across, yeah.
Obviously the city's it's got a well thought of art school and the university and the writing course, as you say. Has that been helpful for the culture as a whole, or has it been actually a hindrance in that sense? Joining, when you said visual arts, I think Grays has got a fantastic reputation.
I mean, certainly. I mean, a lot of the stuff that got me interested in the first place was friends who were graduating from Grays, and they all came out with this energy and this vibrancy, and they all wanted to do stuff. And quite a few of them, like Sarah Stanley's got the cafe in Glasgow now, which is a kind of pay what you want charity cafe. But she modelled that in Aberdeen. You know, so it started here. It was cafe, gallery. Put on some really weird experimental shows, put on some really amazing shows. The sandwiches varied from day to day. You know?
In a good way or a bad way?
in a good way, you know. But it was almost a little bit too ahead of its time, you know.
Yeah.
So it didn't quite get the support it should have. But I've seen that change. Like, I do feel like the students come out of Grays now and they kind of want it handed to them. You know, they don't want to have to like figure out how they're going to do stuff, you know. Or, you know, if they're able to secure funding, they'll get a space and they'll do like 2 shows over 3 months, and it's like, guys, you guys should be having a party every fucking weekend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's how you build up support and build up like enthusiasm for what you're doing. Like, you know, it's good to have the white cube and to do the nice stuff and to put the nice artworks up, but you know, you have to do the things that get people in, you know. And again, it's like I was saying, it's where everything should really start to cross over. It's like, we used to do DJ nights, but we always had projections and visuals, so we'd have a visual artist would come, whether they had made their own animations or they did live VJing, but then we'd also have artists painting wooden boards, and we'd have live art happening that way, you know. And we tried to do it in a way like it wasn't just like a spectacle, it was like, these are our friends, and we appreciate them coming and making work. You know, and half of that stuff would end up in my house at the end of it, which was always good. But it was trying to show people, you know, you can have like a banging techno set with cool visuals and somebody painting next to it. Like, you don't have to separate everything out, you know. But again, like in the last couple of years, like it's just kind of slowly fizzled down again, you know.
Well, that's interesting. There's a guy, you'll know him, Jamie Dyer. I come across Jamie on social media because he posted up a picture of this building.
Right.
Now, to anybody obviously doesn't know Cement Court, it's quite a brutalist concrete high-rise. And you often at the bottom see photographers, college students, filmmakers using it as a backdrop. And he's just graduated from Grays, and his whole final year thesis was around the building, but also the social aspect to it. And he's somebody that lives his art and he wants to stay in Aberdeen. He loves this building, but a big part of his research in his 4th year was looking at how do people in these buildings live, how do they interact with one another. He spoke to residents. He actually lives here now.
Right.
He got himself a flat and rents it, but all his work revolves around the building. But there's that social aspect, and he's somebody that wants to make a change. It's all very well making art and people can see it and think, yeah, that's nice. He wants to change things, and there's a social room at the bottom that's never used, and he started to get residents along to actually meet one another and to chat.
So it's almost like having an artist in residence.
Oh,
in the
very
building.
much so. And I absolutely love his work. I went up to the degree show this year, and I thought his stuff was a standout. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I don't know if that's indicative of other graduates this year, but he certainly stands out for me as somebody who recognises the city
Yeah.
And these high rises are actually quite unique. They're built to a much higher standard than a lot of the ones down in, say, Glasgow that have disappeared in the last 10, 20 years.
I think he's like a great example of how an artist can, all great art unites people.
Yes,
and it helps to create community, but it has to have that access point. And Jamie creates that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's actively working to engage people and to
Yeah.
have those conversations and do stuff. And I think that's maybe something that's missing
Yeah.
from the art school experience, is that you have power and you have agency. But you have to go out and speak to people as well. Like you can't just wait for them all to come to you. And
A lot of the work I've done with creative learning is that you catch people a year after art school when they're out of the bubble now and they've had the graduate show and they've maybe had some other successes, and then things have just died off, and it's the shock of how do I do this myself? And it's that kind of building skills around artist statements in a way that's maybe more approachable outside of the art school, applying for jobs, applying for funding that we've got to step in with. But I do think, even from my own interaction with Grays and with the Word Centre at the University of Aberdeen, there is obviously a more a push, I think, for academic places to reach out with through public engagement or whatever, but they're doing a really good job of it in Aberdeen, and it's becoming more connected with often like Grays that's pushing for business links, but designing products for purposes and companies, and there's a lot more of that engagement and connection happening. And I think that's pushing a lot of the students to think ahead of the game. And there's been a lot more artist collectives from second and third year students that have come out of, that just surprised everyone in being they're so ahead of the game compared to maybe students 10 years ago who would just wait till they've finished their degree before even starting to think about how can I create a career now.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'll be going in the start of this next term to speak to third year students about Bill Gibb, who I'm writing about in my own work. And it's just that thing of, it was announced I was doing this project about Bill Gibb, and then suddenly the connections happen because Grays are reaching out because they actually want to have that multidisciplinary thing. So I'm learning about fashion, which I never thought I would be, and it's really interesting to me now, but I'll actually be able to see, I'll be going in and speaking to the students about what's your process, because I need to learn this to write my novel, but also then I'll be helping them with how do you write your artist statement, how does that work, so we're sharing our disciplines. So
that's reflected absolutely in music just now as well. Just in the last couple of weeks there was NAFCO, the North Atlantic Fiddle Convention,
Right.
Which was in multiple venues throughout the city and Aberdeenshire, and I went to a couple of shows, absolutely fantastic, and they could have left it at that, but there was a lot of outreach workshops with the public. Come and hear people speaking about the writing process, come and learn how what certain traditional instruments look like and sound like, and some of them are workshops just to improve your own playing, but the amount of workshops for the public to engage with were incredible.
Yeah.
The whole menu, they did it over a space, I think 5 days, and they had dozens of workshops during the day for people to come and drop in if they wanted. So I'm finding there's a lot more of that as well. I think it was the same last year. They had a lot of unusual, more traditional instruments from other countries as well, and people would come and learn all about these instruments and how they could play them.
And it is breaking down that barriers, I mean, art in the community, often the community doesn't know how to get at the art, and it has to be that it's almost taken and showing that this is for you as much as it is for anyone else. I mean, the festivals are interesting, I think, because as far as I know, there's quite a big festival scene up here around. The ones I kind of know about, the Sound Festival and XPO North Live, is that?
That used to be here, but it got shifted up to Inverness.
Oh, right.
So it's the Creative Media Festival.
Yeah.
But it started off in Aberdeen, but it's one of those things that people don't realise it was a music festival here.
Yeah.
It was your first one.
I got pinched.
Oh dear.
Or moved a lot.
If I ever do one of these in Inverness, I'll have a...
It is a great festival, to be fair to them. So.
But there are
And there's True North as well. It's coming up in September. It's a music festival,
Yeah.
and they get some pretty big names coming up for it.
Got Mogwai.
Yeah, I'm all right this year.
And does that help that when those kind of festivals happen, do they involve local musicians, or does it tend to be, here's a festival, you're smiling at talent?
I think Glasgow.
Does just Glasgow go for a jolly up to the northeast? Is that
There's a couple of things. I think when they first the True North Festival emerged, it was kind of it was almost billed as highlighting local talent, but in focusing. But where's the local talent? But it comes back to, if it's not there in the first place.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. There are some very talented people in the northeast. But ultimately, if it's a festival, they need to justify it. They need to get bums on seats. They need to sell tickets.
Yeah.
So they do get in big names. They're not from here. We don't have those names here.
Yeah.
I mean, like Catherine Joseph, obviously, is from this area.
Yeah,
And she always brings people. But, you know, we don't have that many Catherine Josephs.
No.
To be fair, Charlie, I did DJ at one of the two
Oh, well, there you are.
after the bands were finished. So, you know, just to let you know.
Well, that's not a criticism, because obviously Jon Reid's DJ'd.
All vinyl.
Well, I mean, obviously Katie, as best girl athlete, played it. She supported Richard Hawley at His Majesty's.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a big thing for her. That was a big, big show. And it benefited her enormously. And
This is your daughter Kate Buchan.
yes, aye. And I think it's absolutely not an unwillingness to not put on local acts, but they have to make sure that people are going to come and see them. People know who they are. So it's a difficult one, I think, for organisers.
It's the same with the arts festivals. Like look again in New Art, in terms of you want to bring in names that people internationally know, so they might come to Aberdeen, but then how do they connect with the local community and bring in artists? And there's always that balance. I'm sure John could say more about this in terms of New Art and Painted Doors and that, but that's been probably the most significant festival we've had in the last few years.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say as well, it's like there's nothing wrong with other talent coming up here.
No,
and I think it's important for us to see places like Dundee and Edinburgh and Inverness and stuff and actually build better links with them. So I think that's another part of the Aberdeen problem, is a slight snobbery, like, well, but what about Aberdeen? And it's like, well, yeah, you know what, like Aberdeen's had what it's had, and we need to get past that, and we need to say, you know what, Dundee's doing amazing things, let's work with Dundee. You know, let's not just try and replicate what Dundee's doing or replicate their successes, you know. And like you were saying, with the New Art stuff, you know, one of the big criticisms or one of the only real criticisms we've had has been, it was great and I loved it, but I'd like to see more Aberdeen artists. And it's like, well, first of all, we haven't cultivated artists that work in that sphere. So we don't really have kind of street artists in Aberdeen. We've got a couple now who have kind of come off the tail of New Art and have been inspired by it. We have graffiti writers as well, so we have a kind of very small, pretty much a one-man graffiti scene in Aberdeen at the moment. You know, the only guy who's been busted numerous times, but is just so dedicated he's still painting. You know, so it's yeah.
You talked about a kind of drain, a graduate drain, that people, you know, graduate and go away. I think as well it's happened with music. You know, I was thinking about Aberdeen bands, like Andrew Montgomery's Geneva, when I remember that, you know, and I think Andrew's down and he's certainly nearer Glasgow these days, and you mentioned Catherine Joseph, and I know Joe Mango's from up this way, Ross White, who's kind of electronic music, you know, is really, and in fact the only one I could think of that I knew for sure that was still up here was Little Kicks, who've been up here and going for quite a while, I think, like that. And is that still a problem that the folk kind of leave Aberdeen?
In terms of music, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, certainly, let's look at, say, if you're looking at the whole North East region, traditional musicians, then they are going to gravitate towards like the Royal Conservatoire in Glasgow.
Yeah.
So Iona Fife, it's a good example for Huntly in Aberdeenshire. She's fantastic. She's really making a name for herself.
Yep.
You know, and she is absolutely going places, but she needs to be down where it's all happening. She's studying. I think she's coming to the end at Royal Conservatoire, so she needs that. I mean, she's chosen to go down that educational route. But I mean, most of them do.
Yeah.
But as far as a traditional scene, we were speaking about the Blue Lamp. That's there, and I've spoken to a few people about this. The traditional musicians, they'll go to those sessions, and you'll see some incredible sessions there. But they all go down to Glasgow and Edinburgh. I think it would take, especially the traditional music, it would take a lot to make somebody who's got real aspirations to make a career in music to stay in Aberdeen. But as far as bands go, I don't think they need to. It's different these days, whereas before you had to go down to Glasgow, you had to go to London to make it. I don't think you need to, because people are so much more mobile these days. People can make a noise about their music
I
online.
think that's absolutely right.
And I don't think there is the need. Traditional music's maybe different, but I don't think otherwise. But bands still do it. They still head off down to Glasgow or Edinburgh. Maybe the only exception being Katie, who moved to Glasgow and came back because she didn't like it. Good old best girl athlete, sticking it to the man.
But I mean, your record, C.S. Buchan and Friends, I mean, it's got Iona Fife, it's got Elizabeth Russo on it, it's got, to remind me who else is on it, Stephen from Little Kicks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why did you choose to do that record in that way? Was that just to show that there was other musicians that were around?
I didn't actually answer your question before about why the label started up. It was for that purpose. It was to provide a platform for a network of people, because I realised we're all doing great things, but we all play on one another's records, but we all sound distinct from one another, and it was like, let's start something up to actually provide this platform so people can shout about it, and that's why it started up. And yeah, I guess the C.S. Buchan record was a little bit like that. It wasn't quite as contrived, actually. It was just one song that I can't sing this, I'm rubbish on this. I wonder if it was actually Stephen Mills. Like, Steve, do you fancy singing on this? I was like, that's great, that's really good. And then Katie had sang on one. I was like, this is not Best Girl Athlete, this is one for me, but she sings it better than me. What'll I do? Well, let's ask other people to sing. So it actually wasn't really that contrived. It just happened by mistake, really, and it just so happens it came out rather nice. But actually, just today I've written another album, but I was quite determined to make it my own this time. But then I realised the exact same thing. Like, I would love somebody to sing that. Oh, and that I could imagine this person. Oh, and that. Oh. So it looks like there might be a C.S. Buchan and more friends.
More friends, and even more friends.
Keeps the pals.
Well, I've done 4 on my own as me, so I've done it with friends and seem to like it a lot, and as do other people. So maybe do it again. Who knows?
You mentioned kind of how things have changed about getting music or everything, all kinds of art out there, online. Since you started the website and doing your blog, what have you noticed about that, John?
Yeah, I mean, like seeing the stuff that we've had over the last few years has been, I mean, obviously new art, I would say, has been the biggest change. It's big pretty pictures on walls, which can get a bit of criticism, but so many people said this is the best thing Aberdeen's had since the tall ships, and it wasn't so much the fact that it was putting pictures on walls, but it was something that people could relate to, say, Glasgow or Edinburgh, and they said, you know what, Aberdeen's got this now, so we're now cool, and I think that was really important for a lot of people to be able to feel like they lived somewhere that these kind of things happened, but also with the street art stuff, it's so engaging, there's it's taking local history and putting it on walls, it's taking international artists and putting them into the city, but then it's also trying to provide those opportunities for local people as well, so we do like the tours, for example, and I'm one of 3 tour guides. And I say to people at the very start, it's like, I'm not here to give you a lecture for an hour and a half about street art. If you see something, point it out to me, because I might not know about it. This is a shared experience.
Sure.
And it's about us as a group, taking in art, looking at the architecture, exploring the city, and just having a good time together, and doing it as a group, And I think that's where the real kind of power's been. And obviously things like Mary's painted doors as well, it's like actually taking artists out of their studios and putting them on the street has been massively powerful for showing off what we actually have here. And again, it comes back to that thing of, the artists are happy in their studios and they'll go to Edinburgh and put a piece in the RSA. But it's like, well, do the locals know what you're up to? Like, Addy, you're shown in London, you're becoming an international name, and half the people in Aberdeen probably don't even know who the hell you are. So that's what I wanted to try and provide. That's what the blog kind of aimed at. Is documenting some of that stuff and that work that's happening behind the scenes and giving it a repository. And I've kind of realised what I've done maybe isn't so much promoting stuff to the best of my abilities, but then I work full time.
Yeah.
Everything I've done has been in my spare time pretty much. But it's created an archive that I think we can look back on now, and I can look back on, and I can say, here's the answer to the question, does anything ever happen in Aberdeen? And it's like, overwhelmingly, yes, it does. And I only cover what I'm able to cover, and I obviously have my own biases and my own politics with people as well. So there's a whole other spectrum beyond that isn't even covered, You know what I mean? So it's
Absolutely,
like,
I think that's right. I think
you know,
blogs like that, like yours and other people's in a similar way, are the place that people will then go back and go, well, then what was happening in 2010 to 2015, you know, and that's what it is. It's not perhaps people writing it down or researching it through libraries or any of those kind of things. In terms of writing up here, I mean, you were at university, did a creative writing course there. Is there a more kind of street level writing scene in Aberdeen? Is there are things going on?
There is plenty. I guess what I've been here and what I had issues with and what I think has changed is that it used to feel like there was a lot of beginners groups and it was all at the beginners level, and then a few people who just had taken that bit further, and obviously then there's a pool to go to Edinburgh or Glasgow to get nearer the publishing industry, the publishing scene. And I've almost been tempted down that way myself, and then realised, oh, actually, it's not as much of a competition. I would be the back of a queue if I went down there, and once you're known and people can approach you to do things, there's so much going on, and there's so much happened in the last few years. And I mean, at Creative Learning we hosted a fellowship, the Dr. Gavin Wallace Fellowship. We hosted it last year.
Oh yeah.
And to see applications that came through for people who could write in that theme and that topic, who are huge writers who were applying for it. Who it was Morna Young, the playwright, that got it in the end, who was brilliant and wrote 5 plays. So we got, like, all these things were happening, but we were also trying to get her to connect with the local scene, and she was just like, wow, there's actually so much happening in the city and so much promising new talent coming up. And from the writers I've worked with, a few of them have now got agents, have secured publishers, have maybe moved away, but they always come back for critique groups because they've actually found that this was the starting point of that journey towards maybe being more professional. So I think, my perceptions of what I thought the writing scene was like when I first came here compared to now, I just feel so connected to it. I can't really see how I would have a similar career anywhere else. Totally, I can make a living here, which I don't think other folk can say. In some of the other cities in Scotland. So a lot of folk have said as well that if you want to cut your cloth, go to Aberdeen, because if there's job applications, we do get low amounts of job applications coming in for really important, significant cultural posts, and it's insane. And because people maybe don't think to come here, but the folk who do are going, wow, look at all these experiences I'm getting. There is actually so much to have and come and get here.
Note of that.
I get lots of funding because we didn't get the City of Culture bid. The council did put a lot of money. It's the money they would have spent on the 2017 City of Culture bid they put into culture, and having that financial backing has allowed a lot more to happen for individuals and organisations. But there is obviously now 2017's past, the threat that will die off. But so many things have popped up, like new art, like the Anatomy Rooms, which is more new studio spaces, which was really needed for so long. And the only thing I think for me that's missing now is the buildings to reopen, because I really miss the art gallery and the music hall and things like that. And that is when you're in that phase where things are still being constructed and built up. It is a bit frustrating, but things like new art and that make up for it. Totally make up for it.
And is there a real kind of general excitement that these buildings are being kind of repurposed and are going to... Being in the council, I can hear more about what's going to happen with the gallery and that. But I've been going into the Treasure Hub, which is a new facility which holds all the galleries and treasures, I guess. And I've just blown away with what's actually been hidden away from the public before when it was open, and what will now be able to be shown in the new space. And it's really exciting. I've been looking through Bill Gibbs' work in there, and they've got the most out of anyone, 2,000 items, and I was like, this is a much bigger job I've got myself into, and I realised it. So in an educational sense, I think you should tell us who Bill Gibbs is.
Oh, okay. Me and Charlie are from Fraserburgh. He's one of the few, I suppose there is a fair few amount of famous people from Fraserburgh but that aren't as known as they should be, and he was a fashion designer who made it big in the 60s and 70s. In London, and had a global international career, dressed Elizabeth Taylor, Bianca Jagger, and he was but he's undersung definitely. So that's why I felt compelled to write about him, because all that we have in Fraserburgh is like a wee bit in the Heritage Museum, and he deserves a lot more. So that's what I'm hoping to do.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
And to stick on kind of literature, when you're talking about, spoke about the language and use of Doric. Is there a Doric literature that is maybe not even historical, but which is happening now? Are people more likely to write in that way?
I think people feel more validated and encouraged to write now. There was just last week a Doric translation of Jane Eyre was released, written by Sheena Blackhall, and we've had the Bible translated into Doric, which has actually been really influential in terms of people realising how much Scots there is to be used. I did the Doric translation for the new cultural strategy for the city, and at first I thought, how am I going to do all these technical terms in Doric? Then you realise we've got words for all of it.
Yeah.
I use Doric. I try and make it more accessible to try and get published outside of the area. That is the issue.
Yeah.
That's why I find it harder to. My agents also struggle in terms of trying to convince publishers that this is something that. But it's actually, you sometimes find that English publishers are more excited by it because they think it's something new. And the Scottish publishers are like, oh no one will get this, and even though half of them probably speak a version of Scots themselves, so it's always that perception problem. But Morna Young, who I worked with last year, who hosted for the Gavin Walls Fellowship, her work's all in Doric, and one of the success stories of that was that there's a play called I, Elvis, which is about a female Doric Elvis impersonator, set in Tory. That's now we have a full Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and it's been touted as one of the big things to look out for, and we couldn't have asked for a better response. Joyce Faulkner is amazing as Doric Elvis. So that's the sort of thing that now it's going to be in Edinburgh for an international audience, a fully Doric play. So just it shows it can work.
But I think that kind of gets to the heart of a lot of what we talked about, is getting the community feeling it's part of the community, is hearing the language that you were saying you speak at home, or that you heard in the playground, whatever, in art, on the page, or in a song, or whatever. Then folk go, oh yeah, I understand that, and that's for me, and that's my community. And I think that was lost in lots of parts of Scotland for so long, and they didn't do that. And it was that I think is central to a lot of the changes that are happening all over. Well, before we finish up, what suggestions, let's start with you, Charlie, what would you say is exciting you about what's either happening now or coming up? And that can be on the label, or it can be whatever you like.
I've selfishly been so focused on myself lately. I've actually been neglecting other things, and knowing that you were coming up, I was looking at the label Bandcamp the other day, and it was quite, I amazed myself. I was like, holy moly, I've done quite a lot.
Right.
And I've really took a back step in the last probably couple of years, because Basketball Athlete took off more than expected, and then started doing my own thing, and that got a bit more notice than I expected also. So I've actually been trying to think. A lot of the projects I've done in the past have been really collaborative, trying to get people working to a theme, working together. So I'm kind of planning out a new project, which is ultimately trying to pair musicians together, working cross genre. And that's something that any projects that I've done, people love doing it, respond so well. But like I say, I think I've been focused on my own music in the last couple of years, so I'm kind of trying to look at how I can get involved again with other people. So for me, that's
what's coming up.
Bringing a few genres together, maybe.
John, whoops.
So me and my partner Mary, who's sitting next to me, but she's a bit shy, so didn't want to say anything.
I think we're going to have to get Mary to talk about the Doors project. If you don't mind. If you don't like to hear, we can cut it out, don't worry.
We've just set up our own art studio together in Rosemount, so although it's our kind of studio where we make work and it's not a huge space, we think it's important to open it up to the community and try and have a space that maybe, for example, we were speaking about music stuff, there's a lack of small venues. For us, we have that on the art sense, that we can have like a graduate show, or like somebody wants to do a small community project, we can have them in. So we've just applied for funding, for the first time I've ever applied for funding, I think, to try and kind of
that's never a pleasant experience.
I know. I said that. I was like, nothing makes you doubt what you're doing, like writing a bloody funding application. But we think we did a strong one, so we're hoping that we'll get some money for the council, and it'll just help us to. I mean, we're going to do it anyway. This is the thing. regardless of what we get, we're going to do what we want to do, but it just helps with everything. So we're looking at a couple of small shows with friends, we've got a couple of kind of street art things we're working on, some painting shows, and yeah, just like trying to mix things up, you know. We'll have an opening, Charley can come and play if he wants, you know, we'll maybe have some like live art happening, but just trying to create a nice underground space that people can come and feel part of. You know, it's not just stepping into our living room and you have to kind of watch your P's and Q's. It's like, we want a space that people feel invested in. And then just continuing to support all the other projects we're working on and trying to uncover all this amazing culture that I've just heard about from Shane and Aberdeen, you know?
But I think accessible spaces, going back to what Charlie said earlier about music venues, are so important that folk feel that they're welcome in, because often that's not the case. You know, if you go to a space which is in the university or in an art school, then I think sometimes people feel they're not invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Inviting spaces, that's the thing. Yeah. Shane?
I think as well as the art gallery, which will reopen next year, for me, the theatre scene I think is picking up again, and there's a lot happening. In one group in particular are called 10 Foot Tall,
right.
And they've been taking advantage of that, how they play with space, and they've had plays on in Brewdog and in sort of unusual spaces, and they've also done things like you find out where the play will be on the day, so that people just have this secret staging kind of idea, so that people actually don't even know what they're going to go see, and they get to see something they might not have thought to go to. And they did a great job of putting on Chekhov in Underdog underneath Brewdog, and you just think, would people go see Chekhov if it was in one of the other traditional theatre spaces? The crowd that was there, probably half of them no.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of they're basically growing and growing. So 10 Foot Tall, I think, are next year. I think they're going to be kind of on the bigger national scene. They'll be getting picked up on a lot. So
because Aberdeen theatre's not something I know at all, but has it been strong in the past, or is it?
Yeah, well, I think it had comedic Scotland the What Roots. There's the annual student show, which is a big deal, but I think it was big in the 60s and 70s, and then has had kind of struggled to keep, because we don't have anywhere for people to study drama. I think that's where it's always a problem. But now there's been a bit of turnaround in that, and actors are coming back after their degrees rather than staying down in London, because there is work here. So that's been exciting over the last 2-3 years.
Well, it sounds like there's obviously a lot going on, so I'm pretty excited to see what happens from that. But listen, thanks everyone for talking to us today. That's been great. Thank you, Charlie.
Alistair, thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for coming up.
Thank you, Mary, for being here as well. And we'll be back soon with someone completely different. Cheers.